Hey, it does my heart good to see another gentleman in the program. And I think he's got a real good something to tell us this morning. At this time, I'd like to introduce Bo T.
Thank you, Ray. Love you, brother. Thank you. Hi, I'm an Al-Anon from Hueytown, Alabama, and my name's Bo Templin. Morning, y'all. I'm going to do everything I can this morning to not talk too fast. There's some folks out here that seem to been having problems understanding me. Y'all talk about my accent, and I think you're the ones that have the accent. I tell you this, I spoke a couple of years ago at a little thing up in North Dakota, and you know they really talk fast up there. The guy came up to me after I talked, and he said, "Boy, I loved your story, loved hearing you, but I could have said everything you said in 15 minutes." I want to take just a minute and thank the committee and the people that are responsible for allowing Shirley and I to be here this week. You know, Sessions has quite a reputation around the country, and it's a good reputation. I mean, a strong reputation. And we had heard about it, and when we got the invitation, we began to ask some people about it, some people we knew that had been here, and they would tell us things like, "There's no way to explain it. You just have to experience it." And you know, they were right. They were absolutely correct. And I just want to thank the committee for allowing Shirley and I to be here and to experience this week of love and of fellowship. You people just don't know how much we appreciate that. And I want to take a minute and do something else before I tell you a little bit about me. And I've been trying to do this the last couple of years every time that I get the opportunity to get behind a podium like this where I know there's a mixed group. It's an open meeting, and I know that there are some recovering members of AA in the room with me. And what I want to do is I want to take just a minute and just talk to you AAs. And what I want to say to you, if you're sitting in this room with me this morning and you are a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous, what I want to say to you is thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Because you see, you saved my gal's life. 12 years ago, I'd lost her. The bottle had her, and I couldn't do anything about it. And I was driving myself crazy, trying to get my gal sober. And I couldn't do it. And when the time came for her and she reached out her hand, you had the hand of AA there. And you took her in and you put your arms around her and you loved her back to health. And you taught her how to live sober. And as a result of that, me getting involved in a program called Al-Anon and kids getting involved in a program called Al-Anon, we were able to put this relationship back together. Because you see, when Shirley went into treatment, we'd been married 18 and a half years and we weren't going to make it to number 19. But as a result of you people, we were able to put it back together, and this past April we celebrated 30 years of marriage. Yeah. And we couldn't have done that without you. But you know, I want to thank you, Alcoholics Anonymous, for another reason. I want to thank you for you being wise enough to know from the get-go that this thing called alcoholism is a family disease. Now, I know that you knew it from the beginning because, you see, I'm one of those Al-Anons that reads your book. I'm an Al-Anon that believes in reading and studying the textbook Alcoholics Anonymous. And there's 2 chapters in there directed to the wives and the family afterward that tell me that you knew from the beginning that this thing called alcoholism was a family disease. And you got real busy getting this program solid and getting it workable and getting things like traditions written and everything in place, so that some 16 years after you came into being, when it was time for Al-Anon to come into being, and we stepped forward and we said, can we have your 12 steps? You loved us enough that you said, you bet you can. You bet you can. He said, come on in here, Bo, and you can take our 12-step program and you can learn to live happy, joyous, and free, and it not be dependent on what another person does or does not do. And for that, from the bottom of my heart, this morning I say to you, if you are a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, I say thank you. Thank you very much. Now, I'm going to do everything that I can here in just a few minutes to tell you my story. But in order to tell you my story, it's necessary that I mention her just a couple of times. Some of you may have not had the opportunity to be here Wednesday night to hear her. So I want her to stand up so you'll know who she is when I mention her. This is Shirley. We've got a couple of other special guests here with us this morning, and that's Shirley's aunt and uncle that I don't know if they've adopted me, but I adopted them. They're my aunt and uncle, too. They live over in Silver Spring, Maryland, and they drove over Wednesday night and then drove back this morning. Yeah. And we're just tickled to death to have them here. They're getting a lesson in just craziness. Craziness. And they're loving it. Loving every minute of it. They like hugs. So when you see them, you give them a hug, okay? You let them know what this is about. You know, when I introduced myself to you, I told you I was from Hueytown, Alabama, and I am. But my home group is in Bessemer, Alabama. Now, that's a distance of about 5 miles. There's an Al-Anon group in Hueytown. And both of those groups lay claims on me. The Hueytown group claims I belong to Bessemer. And sometimes my home group might tell you I belong to Hueytown. It just depends. But I not only told you where I was from, I told you what I was, and I want to talk about that for just a second. I told you I was an Al-Anon. And you know, when I got here 12 years ago, I thought being married to my real live alcoholic made me an Al-Anon. And what I've learned is that being married to my real live alcoholic qualifies me for Al-Anon. It doesn't make me an Al-Anon. And there's several things that I have to do in order to stand up here this morning and tell you that I'm a member of Al-Anon. One of those things that I have to do is I have to go to some meetings. Yeah, I have to suit up and show up and occupy a chair. And sometimes people look at me a little strange when I say that, but let me tell you, we got a world full of people out there that are claiming to be part of our fellowship, and you never see them in a meeting. You never see them in a meeting. So one of the first things that I have to do is I got to suit up and show up and occupy that chair. Now, that's just the beginning. I know that this is a program of action. I know that you can't get it by osmosis because, by golly, I tried. But it starts with suiting up, showing up, and occupying that chair. It's kind of like my buddy Milt from Cleveland says. He says, I can go out in the backyard every morning, take that chair out to the back of the yard, set it down in the middle of that chicken pen, and I can sit in the middle of that chicken pen and occupy that chair every day for 20 years. And guess what? I ain't never going to be a chicken. But I suggest this to you. If I do that every day for 20 years, at the end of that time, I'm going to know a whole lot about chickens. Yeah. And I'm going to know a whole lot about how the successful chickens get it done. You hear what I'm saying? It's in those Al-Anon meetings when I'm sitting in there with you winners that I can see the example. And I can see the proof that I need to give me the courage to step out there and take the action in this program. Now, the next thing I have to do in order to tell you I'm an Al-Anon is I have to have a home group. Because you see, when I first got here, I didn't need a home group. I didn't need Al-Anon when I first got here. There was nothing wrong with me. I got here well, and it took me 7 months to find out how sick I was. Yeah. Now, I was going to a lot of meetings. That treatment center my wife went through told her she had to go to 90 meetings in 90 days, and we did. Now, if you're an Al-Anon, you understand that. We did. But we were going around to a lot of different meetings, a lot of open AA meetings, and I love open AA meetings. Love it. But I wasn't lighting anywhere. You know, I was going to a meeting over here and a meeting over there and a meeting over yonder, and I wasn't lighting long enough to let you know anything about Bo. And I wasn't letting you get inside Bo, and I wasn't sharing Bo with you. And as a result of that, I wasn't experiencing any kind of spiritual growth in this program. And it wasn't until 7 months later that I found it necessary to get a home group and get a sponsor and get involved in some steps that I began to experience any spiritual growth in this program. But here lately, a home group has become even more important to me for another reason. You see, I've been around here long enough that I begin to receive some of the rewards, some of the benefits of this way of life. And with these rewards and with these benefits comes something called a responsibility. And it's there in my home group in Bessemer, Alabama, that I fulfill my responsibility to Al-Anon. Because you see, it's there in my home group that I show up on a regular basis. And I show up early, and I'm prepared to stay late. And I make sure that the coffee is made and that the literature is out. And I take my turn chairing meetings. And I make sure that there's somebody there at the door to greet the newcomer. And usually me, or even if it's somebody else's responsibility, I want to get up there too. And it's there in my home group that I participate financially. It's there in my home group that I make sure that I'm there at group conscience and business meetings so that I can have my vote and have my say and make sure that my group stays within the traditions of Al-Anon so that 12 years from now, Al-Anon will still be there in Bessemer, Alabama, as strong as it was 12 years ago, with the hand extended to the newcomer, just like it was extended to me. What are you doing about it, folks? Are you fulfilling your responsibility? Get a home group. Get busy. Where's this thing going to go if we don't take care of it? It's a precious, precious thing. The next thing that I have to do in order to tell you I'm an Al-Anon is I got to have a sponsor. Now, I think sponsorship's the most talked about and least utilized thing in our fellowship today. I really do. Everybody says, get a sponsor, get a sponsor, get a sponsor. Nobody talks about what a sponsor is or what a pigeon is. That's what we call them down south. There's another story behind that. Can't share it from here, but if you'd like to know why they're called pigeons, see me after this is over. We have meetings on sponsorship in my home group. We encourage sponsorship. We utilize sponsorship. If you're a newcomer and you don't understand sponsorship, see some of the folks that have been around the program for a while and find out about it and get a sponsor. If you've been around a while and don't have a sponsor, shame on you. You know, one day somebody's going to walk up to you and say, would you be my sponsor? And what you going to do if you never had one? What you going to, you know, it's hard to sponsor when you haven't been sponsored. So think about that. Think about that. I made a tactical error that I'll tell you about later in my story when I picked my sponsor. We have a good pamphlet in Al-Anon on sponsorship. But I don't think they would have kept me from making this mistake. See, when I picked my sponsor, I picked an old-timer, one that believes in doing things the old way. Now, God knew that's what I needed, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But boy, was it ever a tactical error on my part. My sponsor came into Al-Anon in 1961. And she's very, very active in service work, promotes service work. She's a past delegate for our area, and has been quite an asset to me, quite an asset. The last thing that I'd share with you that I have to do in order to tell you I'm an Al-Anon is I got to take those 12 simple steps that we read. 12 simple steps for a very complicated person. And to the best of my ability, I got to incorporate them in my life on a daily basis. Getting up every morning, talking with God, suiting up, showing up, putting one foot in front of the other, going out there, taking the action, being the best Bo I can be today. Some days I do pretty good with that, especially around things like this. Other days I just don't do so good at it. But you know what I found out? It's not really important how good you do or you don't do. The important thing is, are you putting one foot in front of the other and taking the action? Are you getting out there on the firing line? So these are some of the things that I didn't find it necessary to do the first 7 months that I was here. First 7 months I was here, I sponsored myself. Now, I don't recommend that to anybody, but that's what got me to the point where I could finally settle down and begin to get in the program rather than be around the program and experience some spiritual growth in my life. But I guess I better take a few minutes here and tell you a little bit about me. In order to tell you about me, I have to go back and start with this simple statement. I was born at a very early age. Now it's necessary for me to go back and start there, you see, because I was born into what I've learned is a very good breeding ground for AA, Al-Anon, and Al-Anon. I was born into a very strict, very religious Southern Baptist home. And I was taken to church on Sunday mornings and Sunday nights and Wednesday nights on a real regular basis. And what's important about this time in my life, this went on up through my late teens, what's important about this time in my life is that it was there in that Southern Baptist church that I formed a conception of God that I was going to bring into adulthood with me that was going to cause me some problems. Now let me straighten this out right now. It was not the church's fault. They taught me that God was loving and God is forgiving in that church. I know they did. But what I chose to bring into adulthood with me was a conception that God will get you. God's out to get you. And I had him sitting up there in that great white throne. And he had that big scoreboard, and he had Bo's name up there on that scoreboard, and he was keeping tabs on Bo. And when Bo did something good, there was a little check. When he did something bad, there was a big X. And every time the big X went up there was a price to be paid. And several years down the road, when the disease of alcoholism reared its ugly head in our home, and things got as bad as they had to get, you see, I never stopped praying, but my prayers became the why me prayers. And how could you do this to me, God? And how much more of this, God? And what's next, God? Because I looked on Shirley's drinking as a punishment to me for something that I had done. And then God was punishing me through Shirley by her drinking. Now, this, and by the way, this was my conception of God when I found the doors of Al-Anon. That's what I brought. It's changed today, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But being raised in this good Christian home, my mom and my dad didn't drink. I had just enough sports ability to be involved in sports, and I never did get in with the drinking crowd, and never was around any drinking. I found out since we came in these programs that alcoholism is rampant through my family tree. I got that aunt that Shirley talked about this past Valentine's Day, picked up a 33-year chip in Alcoholics Anonymous. Her husband, Uncle James, died a couple of years ago with 30 years of continuous sobriety. I've got a younger brother that has 6 years of continuous sobriety in Alcoholics Anonymous. I've got some uncles and some cousins that are still out there working on their story. But that's okay. If they don't die, we'll get them. We'll get them. But I never was subjected to any of the drinking or any kind of recovery or anything. It just wasn't around it. It wasn't part of my life. In my mid-teens, I met Shirley. She didn't drink for totally different reasons, but the deal is she didn't drink. So I didn't drink, she didn't drink. We met and we started dating and we didn't drink. And there was no drinking in our dating. We dated for 5 years and finally decided we was going to be able to get along. Set the date to get married. And here we were, two young kids just madly in love, ready to set out on this thing called a great American dream. Now let me tell you about our great American dream. It's centered around something called a dollar bill. Because you see, that's all we knew about life. We had been taught, or at least what we had perceived, was that successful people have lots of nice stuff. And that was our goal in life, was to have lots of nice stuff. Now there's a problem with that, you see, if that's your goal in life. Because if I buy something nice and you live up the street from me and next week you get something a little nicer, then I got a problem. That means I got to go get a better job, ask for a raise, get a second job, usually go deeper in debt to out-nice you. But this is what our goal in life was going to be, was to have plenty of nice stuff. Shirley had a pretty good job, and I had a pretty good job, and we got married and set out on this great American dream, and was doing good. Doing good. We saved up enough money in that first year for that down payment on that first little home out there in Hueytown, and married a year, and we got that first home, and we were off and running. Off and running. 3.5 years after we were married, God gave us the most beautiful, blonde-headed, blue-eyed baby boy that a daddy could ever want. And Mike became a part of the great American dream. 17 months later, along came the most beautiful, brown-eyed, healthy baby girl that a daddy could ever want. And Sissy became a part of the great American dream. And we sat down and we took stock. We had 2 kids, and we had 2 cars, and we had 2 jobs, and we had a house, and everything we had was mortgaged to the hilt. And we was happy, living the great American dream. But you see, the great American dream had to have 2 paychecks, so Shirley had to go back to work. And it was after she went back to work, after Sissy was born, that she was invited by some gals at work to join this social sorority, and she did. And it was at one of those social sorority dances one Saturday night, late in the summer, down on that Warrior River, not too far out of Hueytown. And the lights down low and the soft music, the live band, gentle breeze, moon reflecting off that river. And I mixed my wife the first drink of alcohol she was to ever have. And I handed it to her and I said, "Here, honey, drink this." And it wasn't but a few years later that she was right up in my face. And she was shaking that finger and she was saying things like, "Bo, if you had never given me that drink, I wouldn't be the way I am today." Well, you see, I didn't know anything about the disease of alcoholism. What I knew was that our life was changing. I knew that our relationship was deteriorating. I knew that our family was coming apart. I knew that our financial situation was terrible. And I could trace it all back to when I had given her that drink at that sorority dance. That's when these things started happening. And so I agreed with her. And I absolved her of any responsibility for anything that happened as a result of the drinking. And I took on a load of guilt that was to almost get to be more than I could bear before I found the doors of Al-Anon. Now I could stand up here for 2 or 3 more hours and share war stories with you, but I was given some instructions before I came up here by a group of golfers that are sitting back there, that they had gotten a late tea time today so they could come here this morning. And so I assured them that we'd be out of here in time for them to make their tea time. But you know, I love war stories. I really do. You know what war stories are. You know what I'm talking about. War stories are when we're sitting around drinking a cup of coffee, you know, and I'm sitting around and I'm telling Maurice and them about how I cut my finger a couple of weeks ago and like not to ever got it to stop bleeding. Had, you know, did just one of those cuts that just really wouldn't stop bleeding. It was terrible. And Maurice looks at me and says, "Oh, Bo, that's nothing." I said, "Golly," he said, "about 6 months ago," said, "I cut that same finger on my hand," said, "it took 17 stitches. And then, of course, old Wayne, you know, Zippy. Wayne's sitting there with us, and he said, "Oh, you guys don't know anything." He said, 2 years ago, I cut that finger off. And it grew back. You know, if you've ever been in a newcomers meeting, you know what war stories are. And I love them. I love them. But I've found out something about war stories over the past 12 years. I found out that my war stories and your war stories are the same. Oh, the times are different, and the places are different, and the faces and the people are different. But you get all that out of the way, and you know what's the same? The pain. The pain is the same. You see, we all hurt pretty much just alike. So rather than share war stories, what I want to do for a few minutes is I want to share with you a few of the pains that I experienced as a result of the disease of alcoholism in our home. And the first pain I'd share with you is that pain of guilt that I've already talked to you about, that was to continue to grow and grow and grow as long as the drinking went on. And I continued to take responsibility for it. The next pain I'd share with you is a pain called anger. I don't know about you, but let me tell you about me. On a good day, I got up angry and went to bed angry. And on a blind day, I got up angry and I'd go to bed in a blind, running rage. And I couldn't figure out how to get out of this. I had not been raised that way. I had not lived all my life that way, but I did not know what to do about it. I was just living my life full of anger. The next pain I'd share with you is a pain called resentment. And I didn't even know what resentment was till I got here and you explained it to me. But in retrospect, I see that I was living a life full of resentment. Because you see, I had gotten to the point that I resented you if you lived up the street from me and you had nicer things than I did, because our nice things were going. They were gone, and I could no longer keep up with you. I knew that I resented you if you lived up the street from me and I saw you and your kids out in the yard cutting the grass or doing anything together. Because you see, we weren't doing things together anymore. We were four people living four separate lives under one roof. And that's what the disease of alcoholism had done in our family. I knew that I resented you if I saw you and your family when you got in your car and you passed by in front of my house going somewhere together. Because you see, we weren't doing things together anymore. And I guess the biggest resentment of all was I resented God, because you see, God was still punishing me, and I didn't know how long God was going to continue to do that. Life full of resentment. The next pain I would share with you is that pain of self-pity, because I've already shared with you what my prayers were. Why me? What's next? Where is it coming from next? How much more, God? Living my life full of self-pity, full of self-pity. The next pain I'd share with you is a pain called confusion. Because you see, I drank too. And I could drink or not drink. I could start drinking and stop drinking. And I didn't understand the disease of alcoholism. And we would be going somewhere, and my wife would look at me on Saturday night as we were leaving to go to a dance, and I knew that she was sober because I had not let her out of my sight all day long. I knew it. And I would say to her, honey, when we get there tonight, I'll have 2 drinks and you have 2 drinks. And she would look at me and I know she meant it when she said, you're right, Bo. She said, let's go and we'll have 2 drinks apiece. And we would go to the dance. And I'd have my 2 drinks and I'd look at her. And I would see the change. And I would know that we were off and running again. And I didn't understand that. I didn't understand it. The next pain I'd share with you, and this is a pain that I hear alcoholics talk a lot about. They talk about the pain of loneliness and isolation. And I believe you when you say that your disease is a disease of loneliness and isolation. What I want you to understand is you don't have a corner on that market. I know about loneliness and isolation too, and it doesn't have anything to do with how many people are in the room. Some of the loneliest times of my life have been in crowded rooms, surrounded by what I thought was the best friends I had in the world at that time. I'll tell you a little story to illustrate that. Shirley was a kitchen drinker. She's a winette, and she did her drinking in the kitchen. She got off work at 4 o'clock. She got home every day at 4:30, and at 4:31 she had a drink in her hand. And she would drink on a daily basis till she passed out. Now, I knew that. And I knew that that was a daily thing. But I didn't get off work till 5 o'clock. So you know what I had to do every day at 4:45? I had to call. Yeah. Because, see, I can smell it over the telephone. Some of you are shaking your heads. You can too, can't you? And if she had started drinking, which was usually the case, then at 5 o'clock when I got off work, I didn't go home. Because you see, if I went home, I was face to face with that other pain that was consuming me, a pain called failure. I was face to face with my failure. See, I was the husband, and I was the father, and I was the head of the family. And I was supposed to be able to take care of anything that came along and fix any problem that came about. And I could take care of the things that happened as a result of it. I could straighten out the family gatherings that we missed. I could make up to the kids for things that we had to cancel. I could pick up the bounce checks. I could take care of the things that happened as a result of it. I just couldn't fix it. And so I was a failure. A failure. And if I went home, I was face to face with my failure. Now, the ironic thing about this is that I was at the top of my profession in my business life. The top of my profession. Very, very successful. I was involved in fast pitch softball. We were traveling the Southeast on weekends. Had a sponsor that flew us to tournaments when we were winners. Very successful in my recreation. Very successful in my business life, very successful in my recreation. But I walked around every day with my head down feeling like a failure because I couldn't get my wife sober. So the deal was I didn't go home. At 5 o'clock, I went to the local water hole up the street with the guys from work. Yeah. Let me tell you what happened at this water hole. Big round table. We all sat down around that round table up there. Somebody would sit down and order a round of drinks. A few minutes later, somebody else would come in. They'd sit down, they'd order a round of drinks. Somebody would finish a drink, they'd order a round of drinks. I'd sit there and I'd have 3 and 4 drinks lined up in front of me. I've seen alcoholics cry when I tell this story. Shed tears. I'd have 3 and 4 drinks lined up in front of me that I knew I wasn't going to drink. Yeah. And the thought would go through my mind, Bo, why are you here with all this booze lined up in front of you that you're only going to maybe drink 1 or 2? And of course the reason I was there was because I couldn't go home. And then the thought would cross my mind, well, why don't you tell these guys about it? Why don't you ask them for some help? Because, see, these were the guys that I worked with every day. These were the guys that I played golf with on the weekends. These were the best friends that I had in the world at the time. I said, why don't you tell them? And then, of course, the big red flag went up in my mind. Dummy, you don't tell anybody that you got a drunk wife at home. You don't tell anybody. And so I would sit there in a crowded room, surrounded by the best friends I had in the world, and I would stuff it, and I couldn't talk about it, and I couldn't say anything, and I felt lonely, and I felt isolated, and I felt apart from. I know about loneliness and isolation. And let me tell you the real sick part of this scene, folks. Mama's home in the kitchen drinking, Daddy's up the street at the bar drinking. And there's two kids at home that wasn't getting anything. Don't tell me it's not a family disease. I know better. I know better. This disease made me the most proficient liar in Jefferson County, Alabama. And I wasn't raised to be a liar. I was taught the difference between the truth and a lie, and I knew the difference. But the disease of alcoholism gave me two new buddies that made it okay for me to lie. And those two new buddies were called justification and rationalization. As long as I could justify it and rationalize it, I could look at you with a big grin and tell you the biggest lie on the face of the earth and not feel guilty about it. Let me tell you a little cute story that illustrates that. I hope you never had this problem, but we had a problem at our house keeping the power turned on. Just every once in a while, the power got turned off. And I got on a first-name basis with this lady down at Alabama Power, and I've never seen her in my life. Got to the point that she'd call where I worked, and she wouldn't ask for Mr. Templin, and she'd say, "Let me talk to Bo." And she'd get me on the phone. She'd say, "Bo, honey, your power bill's 2 months past due again. If I ain't got the money by 3 o'clock this afternoon, you'll have to turn your power off." And I'd kick in. And the first thing would kick in would be that fixed smile that we all had. That smile that says, "I'm fixing to tell you one." Now, I'm talking to her on the phone, but the smile kicks in. And I would tell her something like, "It's funny you should call me this morning. Shirley did not tell me until last night that she hadn't paid the power bill. I didn't know it until last night, and I stopped on the way to work this morning and put you a check in the mail. Now, there's no need to turn the power off. Just wait till the mail gets there in the morning, checks in the mail." And this lady would allow me to get by with that. And of course it was a lie. Shirley hadn't told me. Even if she had, there probably wasn't any money in the bank. But this gave me till 8 o'clock the next morning to go to uncle or to mother or somebody, get the cash money, be down there when they opened up, pay the power bill, and keep the power from being turned off. Now, I justified this by the kids. I had to do this, you see, because the kids had baths to take, and they had lessons to get, and they had to cook supper for them. The kids had to be taken care of, and so that made it okay. Now, that's just one little bitty incident that I'm telling you about. I was living my life that way, okay? My whole life was a lie. But that one particular incident. After I'd been around Al-Anon long enough that I finally got me a sponsor, and I told you I made that error, I picked an old-timer. Let me tell you about old-timers. Old-time sponsors will zing you. They just love to zing you every once in a while. Just out of left field, just zing you. And we were sitting down there at the Bessemer group one night, and got there a little early, sitting there drinking coffee, and Fran zinged me. She looked at me and she said, "Bo, I think you and I need to talk about honesty." And I said, "Beg your pardon?" I said, "Didn't come here to talk about honesty tonight." She said, "I know." She said, "But I think we need to." And I shared that story with Fran because that, like I said, that was just one incident, but that was something that had been on my mind. And I shared with her about how I had lied to this lady for years. And I lied to her, and I felt okay about it because of the kids. And Fran looked at me and she said, "Bo, was there ever a time that you couldn't get the money?" I said, "Oh yeah, several times." She said, "What'd they do?" I said, "They turned the power off." And she said, "And what'd you do?" I said, "Well, I'll tell you exactly what I did. I did what any great American father living the great American dream would do. I pulled out that plastic card, that money that you don't have, and told the kids to pack them overnight bag. I was going to take them down to the Holiday Inn for a day or two. and let them swim and let them play. And of course what I did is I kept them down there till I could get the money to get the power turned back on. So she looked at me with that smile that she has, and she said, "So the kids never hurt, did they?" I said, "You know, you're right, they didn't." She said, "Why do you think you had to tell that lie?" Let me tell you why I had to tell that lie to that lady at the power company. In Hueytown, Alabama, when they turn your power off, they got a red tag that's about this wide, and it's about this long, and it's bright red. And it says on this tag, "We have turned your power off, 'cause you ain't paid your bill. And when you bring us," and it's got a big blank space there where they can put a lot of numbers in it, "when you bring us this much money, we'll turn your power back on." And what they do with that tag is they hang it on the front doorknob. And see, that was the reason I couldn't let the power be turned off. Because if you lived up the street from me and you passed by, then you would know. And I couldn't allow you to know. Because we had the curtains pulled out there on 28th Avenue in Hueytown, and we didn't allow you in. And we had that great unwritten rule that every alcoholic family has, and that rule is you don't talk about it. And what you had to do before you left our house is you stopped right before you went out the front door. And you straightened up and you made sure everything was in place, including the smile. And when you hit the front yard, you told the world we were fine, thank you. And yet inside we were dying. Dying from a disease called alcoholism. And didn't know where to go or what to do. And this is the way our life went, and it continued to get worse as long as the drinking continued, just like it did in your family. And I continued to do everything I knew to get my wife sober, and nothing worked. And then one night in July of 1982, the kids and I were going to a ball game, and it had been a long time since we had asked Shirley to go, and I think probably it had been a long time since she had wanted to go. Because see, we'd be gone 4 or 5 hours, and this would give her time at home to do whatever she had to do without us looking over her shoulder. And as we started out the door, Mike turned and looked at his mom, and Mike was 15. And he looked at his mom and he said, "Mom, when we get home tonight, you're going to be passed out on the floor, passed out on the couch, or where are you going to be passed out, Mom?" And see, we never know what it's going to be that's going to reach him. But as Shirley shared with you, for the first time in Mike's life, she wanted to slap his teeth out. And she had made a vow with God that she would never lay a hand on one of her kids. And yet she had reached the point that she almost did. When we got home from that ball game that night, we knew something was different because Shirley was still up and it was well past her passing out time. And the front door was open and she was waiting on us, and when we got in, she had been drinking, but she wasn't drunk. And she met us at the door and she told us that she had called a treatment center and she was going to do something about her drinking. And I looked at her with all the spite and with all the anger that I knew that I had at that time, and I said, "This is number 1382, Shirley. What's different this time?" And I told her I didn't believe her, and I went to bed. And it wasn't until the next day, when this treatment center called me for some information, insurance information, that I even believed that my wife had called. Now I want to talk about something that happened up there at the treatment center for just a minute. I want to tell you about us taking her up there. You should have seen us. I had a pickup truck. The kids put 2 lawn chairs in the back of the truck, had a cooler full of Pepsi back there, and had one of them big blaster radios. And they're back there in the lawn chairs with their Pepsi and the radio, me and Mama up front, and you'd have thought we was headed to the beach. Taking Mama off to treatment. Got up there at that place, got her checked in. This counselor standing over there says, "Bo, I want to talk to you for just a minute before you leave." It's okay, what is it? He said, "We have something up here called Family Week. He said, that's when we're going to ask you and both kids were 13 and 15, said they're old enough, said we want you and both kids to come up here and stay from Monday to Friday, live right here in the facility, and be a part of the treatment process. He said, I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail. I'll send you a letter that will explain it and tell when it's going to be. I just wanted to make you aware of it. And then he told us we could go. Well, the kids are up front with me going back home, and the kids looked at me and they said, Dad, we don't know about this thing called Family Week. We don't know if we want to go. See, Dad, while you was checking Mom in, we checked this place out. Dad, they don't have a swimming pool. Said, Dad, they don't even have Coke machines. All they have is fruit juice. And said, Dad, the real kicker is we looked in a couple of them rooms that they don't even have TVs in the room. And they were out of school for summer vacation. They said, we don't think we want to go spend 5 days up there in a place like that. And I said, hold it, kids. Whoa, settle down. We're not going up there for Family Week. There's nothing wrong with us. I said, that was that guy's job to try to get us to come, and I was just being nice to him. I said, settle down, we're not going. About a week later, I get this letter in the mail that's explaining it. And this letter had a statement in it that just jumped off the pages at me. And the statement was, we want you to come up here and spend 5 days and learn how to live with your alcoholic. Now, that made sense to me. And I called the kids in, and I showed them that letter, and I showed them that statement. I said, kids, I think we better reconsider. We might ought to go. Because I said, you know, your mom's going to have to change a whole lot of things. We already know there's some stuff she can't drink. There's probably some foods that she don't need to eat. There's some places that she don't need to go, probably TV programs that we need to monitor. I said, we better go up there, kids, because that's what they're going to do. They're going to teach us how to keep her sober. And so we took a little family inventory. Now, we didn't know that's what it was, but it really was. We sat there and we talked about this thing, and here's what we realized. Number one, the kids were available because they were out of school for summer vacation. Number two, it wasn't a matter of money. Remember, this was 12 years ago. We had good insurance that was going to pay for it all. Number three, I was like any good untreated Al-Anon. I had 6 years of unused vacation time. It's hard to go on vacation when you're trying to cure a drunk, isn't it? And so there was no reason for us to not go, and so we did. Now, they call it Family Week. I call it Hell Week because that's what it was. Pure hell. We had not been on the property 5 minutes till I was in my first altercation. We got there. They directed us down to the and it took us about 30 seconds till I was standing up and I was shouting across the room at him. And you know why I was shouting at him? Because he asked me something about me. And I told him that was none of his business, that we weren't there about me. That we was there about her, and I'd be glad to help him in any way I could with her. I'd be glad to fill in any of the blank spots they had about her, but we weren't there about me. And he looked at me and he said, no, Bo, you misunderstand. He said, this week is about you. He said, alcoholism is a family disease, and you and these kids have been affected. And this week is about you learning how you have been affected and where you might go for help. I looked at him and I said, if that's what this week is about, then you lied to me in this letter. Now, 18 people in the room, every one of them got a letter, and he wrote it, but I pull it out, and I reread it to him. And he looked at me with a big grin, and he said, yeah, I lied to you. But thank God he lied to me. Thank God. Because you see, I wouldn't have gone. I wouldn't have gone if he'd told me the truth. The first thing that happened up there that was of absolute, ultimate importance is that they started telling me that my wife had a disease called alcoholism. a disease called alcoholism. And that since it was a disease, that I needed to learn about the 3 C's. And the 3 C's being that I didn't cause it, I can't control it, and I can't cure it. Well, you see, I knew that I couldn't control it, and I knew that I couldn't cure it. I had darn near killed myself trying. What I needed to hear was that I didn't cause it. Because you know what I took up there to that treatment center with me? I took that load of guilt that was about to break my back. And it was there in that treatment center and family week that I began to grab hold of the fact that my wife had a disease and that I wasn't responsible for her having that disease. And to come to grips with the facts that way back down there many years ago on that Warrior River at that sorority dance, when I handed my wife that drink, I introduced her to alcohol, not alcoholism. And I'm not responsible for her having that disease. The next thing that happened up there is we had a lady come up there on Wednesday night and hold a real live Al-Anon meeting for us. But she had a captive audience because we were required to go. But that didn't bother her a bit. She had the biggest smile on her face, and she was right there carrying the message. There was 18 of us in that room. I don't know what she did with the other 17. I remember that meeting vividly today, and I remember her looking directly at me and starting statements with Bo, and she just left everybody else out. I know that's the way that meeting happened. And she said things to me like, Bo, when your wife gets out of this treatment center, if she's going to stay sober, she's going to go to AA. And I kept, and she said, that's it. There's nothing else. If she's going to stay sober, she's going to go to AA, Bo, period. Those that go to AA stay sober. Those that don't just don't have a good shot at this. She said, now, if you want to regain any of your sanity and begin to experience any serenity in your life, you're going to go to Al-Anon. Period. And then she threw the kicker in. She said, if you're going to be any kind of daddy at all, you're going to make sure that those 2 kids are introduced to Al-Anon. Period. She didn't say, I hope you do. It'd be nice if you do. We encourage you to. She said, if you want what we got, then here's where you got to go to get it. Just that simple. Thank God. I thank God for the old timers. I thank God for the old timers that didn't give me options. I did not need options at that point in my life. I needed direction. And that's what God sent me. She said, now here's what I want you to do, Bo. She said, I want you to go to every Al-Anon meeting you go to. I want you to go at least 30 minutes early and be prepared to stay at least 30 minutes late. Because she said, I want you to go with an open mind and open ears and an open heart, looking for something that's going to help you in your recovery. And she said, I guarantee that if you go with that attitude, you will get something at every meeting you go to. And you know, every meeting that I've ever been to with that attitude, the guarantee has come true. It has come true. She said, but I want you to go early and I want you to stay late, because what you need to hear that night may not be said during the meeting. It may be said during the fellowship before or after, and you don't want to miss it. So go early, stay late. And she said, and I want you to pick you out a winner when you get there, and I want you to do everything that that winner does. She said, if that winner gets up to go get a cup of coffee, you go get a cup of coffee. She said, because winners talk at the coffee pot, Bo, and you don't want to miss it. You don't want to miss it. And this is the instruction that I was given for my introduction to Al-Anon. Now, the kids and I went home after family week, and we didn't run knock down the doors of Al-Anon. We waited on Mama to get out of treatment. We picked her up on 12 noon on Saturday of Labor Day weekend, 1982. And we headed straight down to Tuscaloosa, Alabama for the Tuscaloosa AA Al-Anon anniversary. 550 people, I think, that night. They have a humongous anniversary. We heard an Al-Anon speaker, and we had a great barbecue supper, and then we heard an AA speaker. But the big thing was we met you. We met you. And we got hugs, and we saw smiles, and we heard laughter. And you began to hook us. You began to hook us. We got back home from that meeting that night, and the kids and I were sitting in there, and Shirley, for her first night home in 38 days. And the kids were worried about her because she hadn't had any chocolate chip cookies. And they had bought her a 2-pound bag of chocolate chip cookies. And we sat down in the middle of the den floor that night, the 4 of us, with a bag of chocolate chip cookies and a gallon of milk. And we talked about something called family recovery. And did we want to try it? And we made a conscious decision and a conscious commitment as a family to give it a try. And that decision and that commitment has led me so far to being standing right here today with you. Now, we asked the kids to go to 4 Al-Anon meetings, 1 a week for 4 weeks. And they did. Sissy fell in love with it. 13 years old, just absolutely fell in love with it. She had found her home. She stayed in Al-Anon till she was 20 and then came right on into Al-Anon. And I thank Al-Anon today for raising my daughter. She's 25 years old today with 12 years of 12-step recovery. And she's a dynamite, active member of Al-Anon today. Beautiful young lady. She was supposed to be here with us this weekend, but because she's such a responsible young lady, she was accepted to graduate school. And graduate school started last week, and she couldn't miss classes. So she had to cancel the trip here to fulfill her commitment to graduate school. She sends her love. Mike went to the 4 meetings, came home, looked at his mom, said, "It ain't for me." Mike was 15 years old, blonde-headed, blue-eyed, darn good-looking, had a motorcycle. Mike had some other things to do, called chasing, and he was good at it. He did some catching, too. But he told his mom, he said, "Mom, I'll support you in your recovery. I'll be there when you get your chips. And, of course, if you go to a convention at the beach, I might try to make that one with you." Yeah. But let me tell you about Mike. Mike worked a program. Mike lived a program. Many, many days I saw he and Sissy go into her room with Al-Anon books and literature and close the door and stay there and talk out problems. Mike worked a program because he lived in a home where the program was practiced. If you live in active alcoholism, you're going to be affected. If you live in active recovery, I believe you're going to be affected. You're going to be affected. Yeah. Now, I wish that I had time to stand up here and talk to you about some of the wild and crazy things in my journey that have led me up to here. But I'm just going to touch on a couple of them because I'm running out of time. The first thing I've already told you is that it took me 7 months. 7 months of being around this program on the fringes to realize how sick I was. And I got up one morning and I looked at my wife and I said, "I don't want to go to work." And she said, "Won't you stay home?" And I said, "I don't want to stay home." And she said, "Bo, I can't help you with that." And I said, "But I see you getting better. And what are you doing to get better?" And she started telling me things that she was doing, like I got a sponsor, and I'm working steps, and I'm praying, and I'm improving this conscious contact with God. And I went back to Bessemer the next night, and when the Al-Anon meeting was over, I asked Fran if she would be my sponsor, and she had a temporary lapse of sanity and agreed to. Now, about 6 months later, Fran and I were talking, and we agreed that I needed a male in this sponsor relationship. And there were no male Al-Anons around, so my gal looked at me and she said, "Bo, there's a room full of AAs out there that are working 12 steps. Go get you one you can talk to." Well, I just happened to pick the one that she had been married to 44 years at that time. And Jim and Fran became my sponsors, and they still are today. But when Fran agreed to sponsor me, she put a condition on it. She said, I'll sponsor you, Bo, if you're willing to go to work. And I said, oh, yeah, I'm ready to go to work. See, going to work meant being up front, chairing the meetings, picking the speakers, picking the topic, ordering the literature. Right. Be up front. She said, no, that's not what I'm talking about. She said, I'm talking about go to work on you. And I said, how do I do that, friend? And she said, we have 12 steps that take care of that, Bo. And if you're ready tonight to make a conscious commitment to implement these 12 steps in your life, that I'm ready to take you by the hand and walk with you. And that's what she has done for the past 11 and a half years and still does today. Is she takes me by the hand and she walks with me. I hope you have a sponsor. I believe God's got a special place in heaven for sponsors. I really do. And we began this journey through the steps, and it's been a fun deal. And I had to do something about this concept of God. Because you see, I still had God sitting up there judging me and punishing me. And Jim, my AA sponsor, when I got to that point that I had to deal with that, Jim took me into the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, into the chapter to the agnostic. And that's where I found the conception of God that I have today. And it's a conception of infinite power and infinite love. Never-ending power and love. And what I realize today is that God is too busy loving me and forgiving me to be judging me and punishing me. And that's the kind of God I have today. And after I got this new concept of God that worked for me then and still works for me today, then I was able to get on into the rest of the steps. And now I want to tell you about a few things that this program has given to me since I made that decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understand Him. A few things that this program has given me as I wind this thing down and close. And the first thing I'd share with you that this program has given me is it's given me something called freedom. Freedom. Freedom from that guilt, freedom from those resentments, freedom from that anger, freedom from that confusion, freedom from that loneliness and isolation. It's not that these things don't crop back up in my life, because they do. They crop back up in the form of daily living problems. What I have today is the freedom of choice, of whether I allow them to stay and consume me, or whether I get with you and we get with God and we do something about it. And that's the freedom that this program has given to me. The next thing that I'd share with you that this program's given me is it's given me hope. And I think that's our message anyhow, isn't it? Hope. Light at the end of the tunnel. It ain't as good as it's gonna be, but it's a darn sight better than it was. Yeah. And then, of course, I'd share with you that the other thing that this program's given me is you gave me that new concept of God that I shared with you that is working for me today. A God of infinite power and of infinite love. And the next thing I'd share with you that this program's given me is you gave me back to me. Because you see, when I got here, I didn't know who I was, and I didn't know what I was. And the longer I stay with you, the better handle I'm getting on who I am and what I am. But even more lately, I'm getting a pretty good handle on what I am not. Because you see, there was a time in my life that I had to be all things to all people, and I had to have all the answers. And it's no longer that way. I don't have to be all things to all people anymore. And one of my most often used answers today is, I don't know. I don't know. But I've got a worldwide fellowship of folks that'll help us find out. Yeah. But when you gave me back to me, you made me responsible to me, for me. And as long as I stay real busy today being responsible for me, I just don't find the time to try to be responsible for you. And boy, has that been a relief. That has been a relief. But the last thing that I'd share with you that this program has given me has been by far the most important thing that this program gave me. And that is, it gave me you. It gave me you. Because see, I'm like that frightened child. The mom takes the child up and tucks the child in, and they say their prayers, and the child is to go to sleep, and then the storm starts, and the wind's blowing, and it's thundering, and it's lightning, and it's raining, and it's beating against the side of the house, and the child gets scared. And mom goes back up there to settle the child down, and she sits down on the side of the bed, and she says, honey, you know you're going to be okay. You know that we said our prayers, and you know that God's going to keep you safe. And the child looks up and says, yeah, Mom, I know we said our prayers, and I know that God's going to keep me safe. But just tonight, Mom, just while the storm's going on, Mom, I need somebody with skin on them. Yeah. And you see, God knew that about me. He knew that I was going to need somebody with skin on them. And so he gave me you. Because that night came, May the 17th, 1988, that our lives changed. When Shirley and Sissy and I had to open the door and look at those three policemen that told us that Mike, our 20-year-old son, had been killed instantly by a drunk driver. And that was a total tragedy. A real turning point in our life. And let me tell you what I did. I immediately went right back to, why me, God? How can you do this to me, God? And what's going on here, God? I don't understand this. Now, I don't want you to get so caught up in the messenger here that you miss the message. Because my message is a message of power, and it's a message of love. And I'm fixing to share with you exactly how this program works. You see, we read 12 steps when we started this program, but that's just 12 steps on a piece of paper. When you walk in the club room and you got the 12 steps up there on the wall, that's just 12 steps on the wall. This program works with 12 steps in action. And that's exactly where the power in this thing is in the action. I went to the phone and I called my mom and I told her what had happened, and she said, we'll be over as quick as we can. And then I picked up the phone and I called my sponsor, and I told my sponsor what had happened. And I can remember friends saying to me, Bo, you've got to hang up the phone. And I said, I don't want to hang up the phone, Fran. And she said, you've got to. You see, I had her on the other end of the line. And I said, why have I got to hang up the phone? And she said, because we can't come to you while I'm talking to you on the phone. And that's what this program was about. Within 45 minutes, AA and Al-Anon was in our home, and you did not leave us. 24 hours a day, you did not leave us. You were there. Shirley and I were in total shock. We were incapable of making a decision, but you were there. And you made the decisions for us, and you made good decisions. And I don't know where you get that except in rooms like this full of folks just like us. And I thank you for that. I thank you for that. Mike was killed on a Tuesday night. Wednesday night in our front yard, 15 Alateens sitting in a circle, Indian-legged, with their arms around each other's shoulders, with our daughter in the middle of a circle of love. And I don't know where you get that, except in rooms like this full of folks just like us. And I thank you for that. I thank you for it. I want to tell you a couple of things about Mike, because I want you to know what kind of boy we had. I want to tell you about the last time I saw him alive. It was a Tuesday morning as he was leaving to go to work, about 7 o'clock. And I'm sitting in there with my chair with my cup of coffee. And Mike comes busting by full of energy on the way to work, pats me on the shoulder, says, I'm going to work, Dad. gets about halfway to the front door and turns around in the middle of the living room, looks me dead in the eye, says, "I love you, Dad." Out the door he went. The last words I heard my son speak was, "I love you, Dad." And I have to thank you for that. Because you see, you taught us how to live that way. We weren't living that way when we got to you. And you taught us how to live that way. And you also need to know that that wasn't anything special that morning. We did it every morning. We did it every morning. Yeah. There was a little girl in the car with Mike, and we buried him on Friday, and on Saturday morning we went up to the hospital to see her because she was hurt. We walked in the room, talked with her for a few minutes, and she said, "I want to tell you something about Mike." She said, "You need to know this." She said, "We saw the truck coming, and we knew we was going to get hit. Mike threw himself across me and said, 'Hold on.' And Mike took the blow." She said, "I want you to know that." She said, "It should have been me." That's the kind of boy I had. And I didn't do anything to deserve to have that kind of son. God must love me a whole lot to have given me a boy like that for 20 years and 6 months. What a deal. What a deal. Yeah. Just how powerful is this way of life? I don't know. My simple mind is not capable of comprehending the power of this 12-step way of life. I can tell you this much. There's a real live alcoholic sitting out here that walked through the pain of losing her son that way, and she didn't have to take a drink. And I suggest to you that that's pretty powerful. Pretty powerful. There's a real live Al-Anon standing here in front of you today that didn't have to load the shotgun and go do something totally insane to a drunk driver. And I had it planned. But you were there. And you recognized it in me. And it was an AA that recognized it. And he called me in a room and he shut the door and he made me talk through it and see the insanity of it. And I didn't have to do it. And I thank you for that. I thank you for that. So I hope this morning that if I hadn't done anything else, I've convinced you of just how important you are to me, just how vital you are to me. And if you've gotten just a little inkling of just how important you are to me, then I'm going to close and I want to make a deal with you. And here's the deal. I'm going to keep coming back to rooms just like this, full of folks just like you. Now the deal is I want you to keep coming back to rooms just like this, full of folks just like us. And if I keep coming back and you keep coming back, then one day, somewhere, just maybe, our paths will cross again as we trudge this road of a happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then. Thank you.
Remain standing, excuse me. We have a nice way of closing. Can't say much more than this. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Keep coming back. It works if you work it. Thank you, everyone.